All right. Hey, welcome to another episode of Coach P's Perspective. So today I have one of my friends, and this man is what I would say a legend in the game, a legend in what he does. All right. So this is Mike Moor, aka Mindset Mike, and anyone that's into the wrestling world, MMA world, or mindset training has probably heard of Mindset Mike. So hey, thanks, bro. I appreciate you being on today.
Oh, thanks, man. It's my pleasure. I'm thankful that we get to talk about stuff that we're both super passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about Mike's background, man. He, was in the FBI for 7 years, former Division I wrestler, works with thousands. And I want to say, I think it was 3,600, probably close to 4,000 individual athletes last year. Every level, we're talking from novice all the way up to our Olympic guys to UFC fighters. So like I said, best in the game, man. And so, Mike, I want to kind of start here. Just tell us a little bit, about your background, where you grew up, how you got into sports, and then especially wrestling. You're a wrestler, but
for sure. So I grew up in Long Island. I was born in Queens. We moved when I was very young to Long Island to a place called East Rockaway when I was in about second grade. There was a flyer that got sent home from a neighboring town's wrestling program. My town did not have wrestling, but they would send flyers home to local schools to populate the wrestling program. So Lynbrook Titans was the wrestling program, and I started wrestling when I was in second grade. And I remember, I was a short dude. I'm still short, right? I'm 5'4", 5'5" on a good day. And I loved playing lots of different sports. I was good at them, but hadn't really found a sport that was my sport. And I always remember my mom telling the story, the first practice that I went to, the coach goes and pulls me aside, stops me in the middle of practice and says, "Where's your mother?" I was like, "Am I in trouble?" He says, "No." So I said, "Okay." I go find my mom. It's like, "Mom, coach wants to talk to you." He's like, "Is this your son?" He says, "Yeah." He's like, "Listen, I don't know what other sports you play, but this is his sport. I want you to understand that this is going to be his sport." And I always remembered that. And, when I tell this story to other people, it's something that's always been a conviction of mine that from a young age, someone told me this is your sport. Right. So when I ever doubted myself, at different points in my career, they're like, "No, this is your sport." This wasn't something that somebody was trying to convince me to stay to practice. This is your sport. He said, "This is your sport. He's going to be special. You need to make sure that he keeps going to practice." And I'm sure we can both reminisce on times for us as wrestling coaches where we saw a kid and we were like, "Where's your mom and dad? I need to talk to them right now." And I've done that a number of times. So I grew up in Long Island, Strong Island, as we call it, right? We don't call it Long Island, we call it Strong Island. And I moved to a place called Seaford when I was in ninth grade. When I was in seventh and eighth, I went to East Rockaway, but I wrestled for Lynbrook High School, for Lynbrook Junior High School. That was a big deal that I wrestled for another school. There had to be a bunch of strings pulled to do it. It was in the newspaper, super cool stuff. We couldn't move to Lynbrook, so we moved to a place that had a really good wrestling program. And that's where I spent my 4 years there. And then, in New York, you have to win your region to go to state. So some regions are easy and you're a 4-time state qualifier, maybe even a 2 or 3-time placer. In my region, I had 4 Division I wrestlers my junior year in my region, right? So I lost the blood round my freshman year, took 5th my sophomore year, took 2nd my junior year, and I won it my senior year. And then the week of, I got a concussion. I won it, and then the week of state, I got a concussion, and I wasn't able to go. So I felt like that was a driving force for me. I always wanted to wrestle in college, but that was a driving force for me to continue my career. I got injured a whole bunch when I went to college, and I had never been injured in my life. So I knew I wanted to wrestle in college, and then when it didn't end up the way that I wanted to, I knew that I wanted to coach always, but that was a big proponent for me to make coaching a focus because I didn't get to finish my career the way that I wanted to, so I want to help make sure other people finish their careers. So, yeah, grew up on Long Island. I'm very much a New Yorker. I think people categorize us as being jerks. We're just really honest and really blunt, maybe in ways that some cultures don't appreciate. but I would say that like I'm very grateful that I grew up in New York. You want to be successful in class, like you need to work hard and be gritty because everyone wants to beat you. You want to be successful in any sport, like everyone's always competing with each other. Everyone's always talking smack. Everyone's always like out to, everyone's always out to be the best. And like, you know, they say when you, the Frank Sinatra song, when you make it here, you can make it anywhere. Like they don't say that about Texas. You know what I mean? They don't say that about California, right? I think, you know, in certain genres of work, in the fashion industry, in the acting industry in Hollywood, or maybe in this industry here or there, but like you grow up in New York, you grow up in a dog-eat-dog world from when you're 6 on the playground. And I feel like that shapes you to be a lot more successful. So I know I always, I went from New York and then I moved to DC for my FBI career. And I felt like those 2 cities play just as much of a role as like any person or experience did. I feel like, you know, I had a lot of like very good people around me, but wrestling, the 2 places that I grew up, those were the 3 things that I think as much or more than any person really made me, broke me, and then put me into the position where I could be the person I am today.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And yeah, so, you know, I'm from the Midwest, so grew up in Oklahoma. I did not have experience with the East Coast. I wrestled guys from the East Coast, but
yeah.
So when I was in my mid-20s, maybe late 20s, training jiu-jitsu, my professor, Mike McCulloch from New Jersey, and he would come in, you know, multiple times a year, new clinics for us and stuff. And so comes down and he's like, hey, dude, I want to bring you out to do a wrestling clinic in my academy. So I'm like, all right. So it was awesome. I mean, he pays for the flight, gives me a couple $1,000. I go out, I do this academy, and I'm out there for 2 days. Then I'm doing private lessons. And then they take me to New York and we go hang out. And I come back to the Midwest. I'm like, it is a whole different world out there. Just the way guys talk, the intensity, everything. And then since then, I've been around a number of coaches from New York, from New Jersey, from those areas. And I love it, man. I mean, I absolutely love it. I love the honest, the black and white, and like you said, the competitiveness of the whole thing. So
I know where you stand with somebody from New York, because if I don't tell you that I don't like you, my body language says it, right? Yeah. And like obviously, I live down south now. I had to do things a little bit different. But the reality is that like that's one of the things I really appreciate about the Northeast culture. There's no like you always know where you stand with somebody. And like good or bad. And that's something that you don't necessarily get in every culture. And I think, you know, wrestling wise too, what was really cool about New York is, you know, in that pocket of the country, we spent a lot of more time on the mat. Like we had a lot of pride on never getting held down and not getting turned. We had a lot of pride on being good on top. And that's not like 80% of the country. Yeah. Like they work it as a means to the end. We spent more time in practice on the mat than we did in neutral. Neutral was a vehicle to get you on top.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's huge. So I tell guys all the time, I send a lot of guys to wrestle in college, and I tell them all the time, hey, listen, like when you get in college, everybody's good on their feet. Everybody is, right? But the game changer is, can you be nasty on the mat? And you know that when you've been a college wrestler, because when I was a senior in college, I mean, you may have a freshman come in who could give me a go on my feet. But as soon as I get on top, I'd annihilate them, right? They don't have that ground game. So my dad was the same way. My dad, you know, who's a Hall of Fame wrestling coach, he made us work on top a lot, man. So for me, like my goal in high school was just to tech everybody and it was from top. But all right, so hey, I want to do this, man. Go ahead.
In different parts of the country, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just saying, sometimes you get a unique coach, like in certain parts of the country that's important to them. You just don't see it as often. So like you were fortunate to have that for your dad, for sure. I mean, you grew up in one of the meccas of wrestling. So like, you know, when you think of top 10 wrestling states in the country, no one's ever going to not mention Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, and this is a story I've wanted to know personally. So how did you get into the FBI? What drew you to that? So tell me about that experience, man, the training, all of it.
Sure. So I knew, like, I was in 10th, 11th grade, I think 11th grade, and I always knew my whole life, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went through phases where I wanted to be a lawyer. I went through phases where I wanted to be in the high ends of the medical field, be a doctor, be a surgeon. I wanted to be a police officer. That's just ultimately, I knew that I wanted to do something that was like difficult to do. So like very few people could do it, would like demand respect from anybody that ever asked what you're doing for a living. I'd be very proud of, and that would make an impact, right? So this all came from my junior year when my statistics class, one of the best teachers I feel like I ever had, not because like him and I had the best relationship. I mean, we didn't have a bad one, but like it wasn't that we closely personally bond. I legitimately think he's just one of the best teachers I've ever encountered. A person who could teach a subject like statistics and make everybody love it, but also make parts of our class be about life. So we did a career, like we were doing a career project. In my statistics class, we were determining what career we wanted to do for the rest of our life as one of our auxiliary assignments. And so we're doing these like career aptitude tests, and I was testing off the charts for like conflict resolution, critical thinking, analytics, things like that. And I'm like, all right, well, what do I do with that? What are the jobs? And the jobs were all like similar things, like being in legal, like being a lawyer, being a police officer. I'm like, well, I don't want to be a police officer. Like, I don't want to write tickets, right? Like as a local suburban kid, that's a lot of your interaction with police officers. Like, I don't want to write tickets. Like, I want to be a detective, but to be a detective, you have to write a lot of tickets and do a lot of beat work first. I was like, I don't want to do that. But I was like, I'm really drawn to the idea of either being a lawyer or being in law enforcement. And I remember, do you remember the show The Practice? Mm-hmm. So that was the show that like made me want to be a lawyer. And then so I started like doing my research. Like, part of my research was interviewing people in the fields that you wanted to do. And the attorneys that I spoke to, they're like, well, if you want to make a lot of money, you have to be a defense attorney, which means you probably have to defend a lot of guilty people. So I don't know how you feel about that, but that's the reality. You want to make a lot of money, it's not going to be with the U.S. Attorney's Office, right? Like, you'll make good money, but you make a lot more, either in marriage law or in like tax law. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to be in a courtroom and litigating and like have that sort of interaction. Ultimately, so I realized I don't want to be a police officer. I don't want to make a mistake as a doctor. You make a mistake, somebody dies. I don't want that responsibility on a regular basis. Because I didn't want to be a pediatrician. I wanted to be like an epidemiologist or like surgeon, where I make the wrong call, somebody dies. I didn't want that. So we're going through this process, and second period chemistry, September 11th, 2001, we get, I start hearing people in my, in the hallway start screaming. And we don't understand. I mean, screams like I can't relate to. It's like just the screams that you see in movies. We're like, oh my God, what's going on? And then we get an announcement over the loudspeaker that to play, and I'm like, it gets me choked up, like remembering it. Just feels like really very, very, very real. I remember getting the information on the loudspeaker saying that like 2 planes hit the World Trade Center, and a lot of my classmates, like they have family that work there. So I had classmates getting pulled out saying like, you got to find your parents. A plane hit the World Trade Center. And I always remember in the coming days, like it was something really like life-changing and shaking. And I just always remember seeing Rudy Giuliani and the director of the FBI walking through the ground zero. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, I want to be a part of the people that prevent that. Because I saw like people that weren't from New York or like didn't have a direct relationship to New York or the Pentagon or to the people in Pennsylvania. It's hard to relate. You can empathize, but it's hard to relate, especially like as a New Yorker. If you were of like emotional age during that time, you're a different person. Whether or not it affected you directly or like you just saw people like they lost parents, they lost brothers, I would say within 2 shades of any New Yorker, you either personally lost somebody or somebody very close to you lost somebody close to them. Yeah. So I knew like in that week, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to be in the FBI. They're the lead investigators in this event. That's what I want to do. So like for the rest of my life, like I made that decision that week that like, yep, I want to be in the FBI. Let's go investigate. Like I'm going to do my project on being in the FBI. So every decision that I made from literally that moment on reflected that I want to be in the FBI. I knew I wanted to wrestle Division I in college. In New York, it was like D1 or bust. People didn't talk about wrestling opportunities in like other divisions. Maybe that's because we're just like cocky people and like you just like, oh man, if you were wrestling D1, you ain't the real deal. Like that was kind of what it was. Obviously, we grow up and realize that's not the case, right? Like that's how I was conditioned. So I was already living a life of a D1 recruit, right? Like I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't out partying all the time. I lived the championship lifestyle. But it was that moment where like, I was like, okay, I have a very clear purpose. And yeah, so my junior year, I made that decision that like I was going to make sure that every decision I made led me to be a Division I athlete that could be in the FBI. So for example, at the time, you couldn't have smoked weed for 7 years before applying to the FBI. So like I was a high school kid, right? Like I made mistakes when I was a freshman and a sophomore. So I had to make the decision like, all right, my clock starts right now. I literally can't touch this recreational drug that everyone messes around with a couple of times. I can't touch it ever because according to the FBI, I can't literally even apply for 7 years. And like people don't realize that because now it's only 3 years. So you can make a decision your freshman year of college or when you graduate college that you're not going to do that sort of stuff anymore. I always remember every time I made a decision that could potentially be bad, I'd ask myself, is this worth my FBI career? No. Right? Like when you know your why, you'll suffer through anyhow.
Yeah.
Right? Like how is easy when you know why you're doing it. So my purpose became very clear that day. And yeah, so I went through college. I chose the University of Maryland. They gave me the least amount of scholarship money than any school that I had applied for. But two things drew me to that school. They were my third choice school until I visited. And I chose that school because we knew we were getting brand new head coaches. And the head coach was coming off of winning NCAA Assistant Coach of the Year. He said he wanted to make a top 10 program and everyone that's coming in was going to be part of something very special. So that, and then the other thing was the fact that on my official visit, they're giving me a tour. And I knew that Maryland was the #1 criminology program in the country. My goal in the FBI was to be ultimately like a forensic psychologist. I wanted to hunt down, I wanted to pursue the mental game in law enforcement. That was my goal. Because I wanted to do sports psychology, but it wasn't really a field. So forensic psychology was going to be my long-term goal. I was going to get into some sort of law enforcement, get my master's or doctorate in forensic psychology, and that's where I was going to go. I'm on my official visit, and they're talking about, they're showing us the crim building, and they're like, yeah, so, University of Maryland by far graduates more future FBI agents than any other place in the country. I'm like, all right, cool, I'm sold. Right? Like I went to campus, I fell in love. I liked the idea of being the part of like the resurgence of a new program. I knew they already had, for what I wanted, they had the #1 program in the country. And now you're going to tell me this is going to set me up for my future career. Like, I don't care what it costs. Let's go. Yeah. Right. And so even though, like I said, I got much better scholarship offers, academic and athletic at many other schools, but I chose there because like my heart told me this is what's going to lead you to your future in the quickest paths. So I said, all right, that's what I want. I'll figure everything else out when I graduate. And so I spent 4 years there. Criminology to many people, well, criminal justice is seen as an easy major. Criminology is more so the study of the theory and the details. And I made the most out of my quote unquote easy degree. I took extra classes. I took summer courses. I worked with specific professors because I knew of their connections to the outside world. My internships were great. I interned at a halfway house and pre-release center and a global terrorism database. Like, I got a lot of hands-on stuff. So fast forward, graduate college. I'm working 3 cash jobs while I wait for all of my government applications to pan out. We're in a recession, mind you. So I graduated in 2008 during the recession. And I worked for the Department of Homeland Security for 6 months. And then I get the call for my FBI interview. Now, I interviewed once before. It was a University of Maryland only thing. And I didn't get the job. And so this next interview, I'm like, I'm going to be as prepared as humanly possible, because what wrestling taught me is that, like, you can beat anybody. As long as you focus on you and you don't focus on them, you can beat anybody. If you don't care who they are, where they're from. And when you and I were in college, we didn't have track wrestling. So unless you saw him on the cover of Win magazine, you didn't know nothing. Right? So I thought to myself, I'm like, all right, I know I'm going, like, everyone was leaving their 6-figure jobs to be in government service for the pension, for the benefits, the security. So when I interviewed, I was just so focused on, like, yo, seize the opportunity, crush the interview. This may be the only interview that you get. Make the most of it. So I did. I interviewed really well. And, you know, I was interviewing against people that were doctors, lawyers, detectives, rocket scientists. Like, the world's best were leaving their job to work for the Bureau. And I got the job. So when I applied, they were hiring about 2,700. Over 270,000 applied. You know, so, like, for me, wrestling taught me you can beat anybody as long as, like, you focus on the right things. Then, you know, I proved that, like, everything that I did for years was for that one moment. So I wasn't nervous that I was going to mess it up. I mean, I had butterflies, but, like, I was so focused. I'm like, this is my shot. I'm going to make the most of it. And, like, if they tell me no, like, I went down swinging.
Yeah.
And then I got the job. And I was the youngest person in the Washington, D.C. field office. And, like, emotionally too. I learned a lot of hard lessons. But April 2009, I EOD'd to the Washington field office. And again, like, wrestling told me, like, never be satisfied. My original station of duty was Portland, Oregon. And I loved D.C. I made, like, the best friends ever. I was like, I feel like this city is in my heart. I was like, I don't want to leave. They're like, well, it's not how the FBI works. I'm like, no, I need to talk to people. So I networked in my first week. I was supposed to be there for 10 days, and I spent 3.5 months in the office. I made friends with the right people. Like, day 2, I met the local leader of, like, the unit that I was going to work for. And he was a University of Maryland graduate. He graduated from the high school that I was coaching wrestling at the time. And I had an opportunity, and I made a good impression. And he's like, we have 13 open slots. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm going to figure out a way to keep you here. 3 months later. And, to be honest, those 3 months in the office, I made serious friends, and I made massive resume building opportunities for a 22-year-old. And then I got to stay in DC. And then I was here for 3 years. I was there for 3 years. I did surveillance. I became a certified hostage negotiator. I did a lot of overtime work, sitting in on drug dealers' calls, right? Like wiretaps, stuff like that. So I was transcribing wiretaps to make extra money. But like that's cool as hell. Like, I had nothing else going on. Like, why? Like, I didn't have a kid. I didn't have a family. I'm like, let me do that. And the FBI, I saw such an opportunity. I calculated, like, I went to all these trainings, went to all these, like, volunteered, applied for, earned it, like, over $150,000 in training. Mm-hmm. I went to. And then I moved to Houston, and ultimately, like, I won't get into this because this will lead into next questions, but I left the Bureau for Wrestling Mindset because I felt like I was in my dream job, but my passion was a career in wrestling. I always knew that I wanted to work in the mental game, and I wanted to do it to make an impact. And I realized when I got exposed to wrestling mindset, my impact wasn't going to be to solve national security matters. My impact was going to be to, change the face of sports.
Yeah. So first off, that's an incredible experience. A lot of, so one of the things that I'm a huge believer on is this: principles are principles. They apply everywhere. Once you understand them, then you know how to apply them. Okay. So a lot of things that you were saying, and, I would say throughout growing up, throughout my coaching career, there's been a small, I would say maybe two handfuls, but a small minority of people that I ran across who already kind of knew ahead of time, here's what I want to do. I'm going to put myself on this path. I'm going to live a championship lifestyle, because at the highest levels, it's lifestyle versus lifestyle. And then they went on that. All right. And then had the guts to jump out and do something. Because a lot of people, they doubt themselves, or they're scared, right? They're scared of failure and they don't want to go after something. But so you went after it. Yeah. So you achieved it, and then had these amazing life experiences. And then I want to implement this. You said you had $150,000 worth of training. One of the things I love being an adult, and I wish I had adapted this mindset more when I was younger, but we must continually grow, and you have to pour into yourself. You have to always have this growth mindset, right? Always looking to improve, always looking to get better. And again, this probably comes back to wrestling, to where we're never satisfied. We know that there's just literally no way to reach like an ultimate limit. You can always get better. You can always improve. So, but now you go from doing these really cool things and all that, jumping into what you said is really like a heart set, not just a mindset, but a heart set and a passion. So tell me about the transition from going from the FBI over the wrestling mindset, and then up to what you're doing now with wrestling mindset.
Sure. So I was passionate about what I did, and I was very proud of what I did. It checked off all the boxes. Like when I was doing that career aptitude test, I was like, well, let me reverse engineer this. Like, I can't figure out the career that I want, but what do I want out of my career? And I wanted these things, right? And like the FBI checked off all those things. In DC, when I moved to Houston, the culture was different. The level of accountability was different. Like culturally, it was very different, right? So I realized that like I became less and less, I can't think of the right word, but I would just say less and less passionate about my work. And I was having to convince myself like why I want to stay. I was like, well, great benefits, well, job security, like, well, this is, what I worked for. If I have to start convincing myself of why I'm here, then like, I shouldn't be here. And I always tell people, if they ever ask me relationship advice, if you have to start questioning why you're in it, and you go back to your why, and your why doesn't smack you in the face and like make you know that you're like, you need to stay, then you need to go. So I realized like when I couldn't change the people around me, I had to change the people around me. So when I couldn't change what was around me, I had to change. I had to leave and do something else. So I was presented with the opportunity is that if I don't want to continue my FBI career in Houston, I could leave, or I could stay and then ultimately pursue a career in wrestling mindset. So my daughter's here. I have a wrestling club here. When I moved here and I got transferred, I opened up a wrestling club. I'm very passionate about trying to grow wrestling and help wrestlers here. And I thought my connection to wrestling, and if I was going to leave the bureau, was going to be to create this like one-of-a-kind wrestling club, make a Legends of Gold type place in Houston. And ultimately, when I realized that that wasn't going to be my calling, I found myself, well, let me back up. I had my wrestling club, and in 2014, I had 13 kids in the state finals. 9 of them should have won. Like you go on paper, you do the fan thing, and you're like, all right, with this matchup, we should win 9 of these. And I'm like, damn, 9 of my kids are going to be state champions. This is amazing, right? 9 of them should have won. Only 5 of them did. 4 of them just crapped the bed. And with my experience and passion in like the mental side of the game, my exposure to higher level sports, I'm like, you knew exactly what you needed to do. I told you exactly what you needed to do. I physically prepared you. We watched video. We did film. I put in hours and hours. Your coaches put in hours. I'm a club coach. Like you had everything that you needed, but this is what showed up. I was like mortified. I poured so much into those kids, and I wasn't disappointed in them. I was disappointed that there's nothing I could have done different. Like, I gave you everything you needed, it just didn't show up. So like, that was 2014, 7 years ago going on, when Wrestling Mindset was in its infancy. And I had started to see them share these Facebook posts that was talking about mindset and wrestling. I would always share them. I was a fan, right? So I didn't think much of it, but like, we got done with that season and I was like, yo, I need to figure out, like, what am I missing? I felt like I gave these kids a complete package of preparation, but I couldn't guarantee the results. I'm like, I'm never going to do that ever again. I'm not going to pour what I did into that season to see 4 to 5 kids just not show up. So I sought out Wrestling Mindset as a client, and I utilized their materials to help my athletes. So we have this, like, I mean, it's still great. We had 5 kids win a state title, 13 in the finals. Like, that's great. But, you know, so like, the losses that hurt the worst are the ones that weren't supposed to happen. And the way that they happen just like hurt even more, right? You put the knife in, there's salt in the knife, like you salt the knife, then you put it in, and then you wiggle it a couple times. That's how it felt like. And so in the spring, we were supposed to go to Disney duels. And I was like, all right, parents, listen, we're not traveling anywhere. We're going to put money into this, because no matter where I take your kids, they're going to have the same problem. And I was like, I can't fix it. And if I can't fix it, it means that they need to fix it. We need to bring in something else that's a third party to help bridge the gap between what they know that they need to do and what they're actually doing. And I saw tremendous success. We started implementing it. Then come the following year, we had a bunch of kids on the program. Like, no joke, I had like 4 of my club kids doing Wrestling Mindset with, at the time, it was probably Jeff or Gene were the only ones taking client, like we're one of a few people taking clients. And my kids had dramatic success. I'll never forget, one girl lost to the same person 3 times in order to get into the set. So during the season, lost 3 times and got worse and worse and worse. Started doing Wrestling Mindset and beat that same girl. After 4 weeks of Wrestling Mindset, beat that girl by 5 points. Got whooped. Then in the blood round, beats the girl who beat her day 1.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen unless you throw the dice and 1 out of 10 times. Wow. Right? So fast forward, they're like, you really understand our material. Do you want to coach for us? I said, sure. I started taking clients. The results that I was seeing online kept getting replicated. My kids were doing it. Other kids were doing it. Then Kyvan Gadsden pins Kyle Snyder. The next year, 2 unseeded wrestlers win an NCAA title in Division II. The Olympic team starts calling. I'm like, all right, I believe in this too. Like, man, this is crazy. So they started trying to get me to leave the FBI. And I'm like, dude, I can't leave the FBI. I want to. I believe in this. But this is a startup. And you're here, and for me to comfortably leave, like, I gotta be, like, y'all gotta be here.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, for like 18 months, they were like, come on. Finally, just like a handful of things didn't work out the way that I thought. And that opened my eyes to like, all right, maybe I need to really start considering this. And, you know, I know you're a man of strong faith. I would consider myself spiritual, but not religious. And there's never... People always talk about, man, you got to look for a sign from God, a sign from the universe, whatever. Bro, I don't know whether it was God, the universe, or whatever who's listening believes in. I got those signs. Like, hit me in the face, I got those signs. And, you know, I have a lot of people in my family that are like very strongly connected in their faith. I've got like two priests in my family. My grandmother, I swear to God, her and Jesus talk every night. Not like pray, like I swear, like Jesus calls my grandma.
Yeah.
And like has a conversation. That woman is connected on a next level. So a lot of things fell apart, other opportunities open, and like someone or something gave me signs I could not ignore. Jeff and Gene made me an offer that was hard to refuse. And like anything else in wrestling, like, man, you want to get to the next level, you got to take chances. So I had this is funny. I used to think Tony Robbins was kind of lame, and I used to make fun of guys like Tony Robbins. And then I saw Tony Robbins quote about burning the boats. I knew about burn the boats, but I've never seen it like in an entrepreneurial sense. And he's like, listen, sometimes if you want to do the unthinkable, you have to make there be zero exit strategies. Like sometimes you literally, and he used a bunch of profanity, and I'm not going to do that on your podcast, but he's like, you need to burn those effing boats. There needs to be no option. You literally need to put yourself in 100% vulnerability. And if you're a gang, he said, and I'm improvising it in my own words, like you need to be a gangster in order to be able to achieve those things. So like you need to burn all your boats. And if you believe and you're willing to bet on yourself, you'll make it happen. I knew there was no way that I was going to leave my job if I felt comfortable, if I was going to be successful in this, if I felt comfortable. Mm-hmm. So my back was completely against the wall. So I saw that video and I put in my 2 weeks notice the next day because there was a bunch of like little things that were like opening my eyes. I put in my 2 weeks notice. I walk into my boss's office, like kind of smiling, kind of nervous. And she's like, do I need to sit down with what you're about to tell me? And I'm like, uh-huh. And the happiest day of my life. So there's 3 days of my life that changed my life that are the 3 happiest days of my life. The day that I walked into the FBI, the day that my daughter was born, and then the day that I left. Mm-hmm. And it was just because like, I felt like it was a heart, God, universe thing. Like universe spoke, God spoke, I answered, this feels so right. And I'm leaving my dream job for my passion. So to give you perspective, because you understand how the business model works, Wrestling Mindset financially, fiscally was in a very different place back in the day. Like only 125 clients, complete, like 125 people on the program, period, right? So I was 100% commission my first few months. No travel stipends, no nothing. It was, I bet on myself. Ultimately, one of the reasons that I left, and wrestling taught me this, I was like, in the bureau, there's a lot of nepotism, there's a lot of politics in any government service. As an entrepreneur, my hustle is what I make of myself and my bank account. And I was like, if you're telling me that I can, if my success is determined if I bet on myself and take chances, I'll pick myself over anything else 10 out of 10 times. So with $0 guaranteed to my name, Fargo was the first event that I did. And in that first event, like I closed, I would say, I'm trying to remember the numbers at the time. I want to say probably like 15, and just that one event, I closed like 15% of Wrestling Mindset's business in that entire year. Yeah. And it was an immediate, like, I knew this was what I was supposed to do. You know, not just in the sales part, but in the fact that like the results that I got there, the impact, I'll never forget. Shout out to this Bryson Alstein. My first trip to Fargo, this kid shows up to my booth. He was the #1 seed in Greco, and he shows up, and his mom drags him there. He's trying to leave the tournament. He went 0-2, and he's like, I told my son that if he doesn't talk to you, because I know you guys are the mindset guys. I told my son that if he doesn't talk to you, that I'm going to ground him for like a week, a month, whatever it was. He wanted to leave and not do freestyle. He's a Greco kid. All he loves is Greco. And he went 0-2 as the #1 seed in cadets. Long story short, the kid hates freestyle. I talked to him over and over and over again over the course of a couple of days. Places in freestyle. And that, like I said, the ability to pay my bills was, I saw was possible. And the ability to make the impact in a short period of time. I'm like, coaching technique and being at the FBI is not enough impact. I need more. Yeah. And then, you said, like, talk about how I got here today. Ultimately, I was the first guy to come on full time. My story inspired other guys to do the same thing. My story, my success inspired guys like Jake Hunter to leave his teaching job. Watching Jeff and Gene leave their successful jobs was an inspiration to me. And, now we grew the company from 10 people to 60 people. And I was just the #1 hustler. That's like what I call myself. Like, I was just the #1 hustler. I was willing to go out and spend money to make money. I was willing to, I wasn't Mindset Mike 6 years ago. Yeah. Wrestling Mindset wasn't the same thing 6 years ago. Like, we had to make that. And I just knew that if I could go to places, create relationships, that in the long game that this was going to work out. So I did a lot of hustle. I made a lot of mistakes and I lost a lot of money, trying to figure it out. But ultimately, like, my why was very strong. It was in the beginning, make sure you pay your bills, create genuine relationships. Eventually they're going to pay off. This company is going to be very successful.
Yeah.
And knowing that we were going to merge to other sports and corporate and stuff like that, like, I knew it was going to work out, and I was willing to sacrifice. What does that sound like? Wrestling.
Yeah.
I'm not good now, but I know if I put in the time, I have the system and the process around me to be very good. So, ultimately, like, I became who I am in wrestling and in the sport because I didn't travel with the intention of, like, I have to make money and I'm developing this relationship for money purposes. I wanted genuine relationships. I wanted to constantly learn myself. And I became like a 10.0 version of who I am because I made friendships and, like, genuine relationships with people that are way smarter than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd imagine, just like in the interactions that we've had, that seems like the type of person that you are too. You're very skilled and successful, and, like, you know a lot. You wrote a book. You're a successful coach, and you're just constantly trying. Like, you're bringing people on this podcast, like I brought people on the podcast a couple years ago. And one, because, like, I want to share my thoughts and my perspective, but, like, selfishly, I want to get smarter.
Yeah.
I want to take all your ideas and learn how to make them work for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, one of the beautiful things about doing a podcast is I get free coaching every week. So every time I'm interviewing people, but for those who are listening, so what you said is very similar for me in that as a coach, we've produced a lot of state champions and state finalists and those kind of things, but you see these guys get to, and I did it myself as a wrestler a few times. You see people that are at a certain skill set, a certain skill level, they get to the big show and then they don't perform. They don't do what they were supposed to do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty frustrating. So I was, over the last few years, Wrestling Mindset does a great job and gives a lot of free information. They put out a lot of information. So I would just steal pieces, right? I would see a great blog, I'd see a great quote, whatever. And I would take those things and share those with my team. And, but then a couple of years ago, I was like, there's gotta be more. There's got to be a piece that I'm missing. And, we are constantly trying to grow and evaluate and reevaluate and do all these things to be as good as we can as coaches to create the best wrestlers, best human beings we can. And so anyway, it was a God thing. It was a blessing. I'm an entrepreneur, was a top 1% in a direct sales company. Some things happened within that company. Anyway, finances were going to be affected. And literally, it was like 2 days later, I get a message in my inbox from Jeff and one of the founders, and he says, "Hey, would you like to come and work for us at Wrestling Mindset?" And I was like, "I would like to know what that entails." So we get on the phone, we talked, and then so I came on and I do, one-on-one coaching, part-time coaching, and not a full-time gig like what you do, and then have been able to utilize it with my own team and then all these other athletes that I'm working with. And just see the system work, right? Just see people jump levels
over and over again.
Yeah.
I'll share something before I forget, and I'm just going to turn my fan on because when I get excited, I'm passionate about it, so I'm excited, right? So, like, as I'm excited talking about it, it gets hot, so I need that damn fan on. When you plug a goal into a system, you have guaranteed results. Period. End of story. That's just how it works. Plug a goal and rely on willpower. That's what happens to 90% of coaches and athletes. Well, I'm going to work hard. Well, how are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to go practice every day. Well, that's not very systematic. Well, I'm just going to, whatever my coach does. I'm like, okay, that's great. But, like, what are you doing on a daily, weekly basis? Right. And like you, I got involved in this because, like, I wanted to be a better coach. And then I'm like, oh, I really buy into this. Like, I want to be more part of this, and ultimately, Wrestling Mindset works. It's a system. It's a process. You plug your goals into it. You do what you're supposed to do. Previously, the process was just hard work and do what you're supposed to do and do this and don't do this. That was the process. Whatever coach says, do it. That's why I started coming up with these new camps, crushing the process. No one knows what the process is till they go through something like Wrestling Mindset or they're highly trained in this sort of thing. when you understand how to convert like what I'm doing with these camps is I'm converting the process into technical, how to teach like the technical version of the process, how to crush the process in winning neutral in top and bottom. So I'm sorry, you were saying, you saw like through the one-on-one coaching and all the things you were doing, how it was working over and over again.
Yeah. So, well, and you brought up the process, and that's something I'm a big believer in. So, and again, I kind of got this from my dad. And as you have good coaches over the years, you steal bits and pieces. And as you study great coaches, you steal bits and pieces. I'm a huge system person, right? So we create systems, and my wrestling team, we've had an over 80% pin for win rate for over a decade now. So now I'm not saying that we win over 80% of our matches, but the matches we win, over 80% of those are by pin. We have a lot of systems, right? And so we help create a system for every single kid we go through. And it's unique, it's different, it's outside the box in a way. We don't abandon fundamentals. I 100% believe in fundamentals. But we've been able to speed up time, taking kids who don't start wrestling until 8th or 9th grade. And
I like that. Speed up time.
Yeah, so they're placing in state by their junior and senior year, when they're not supposed to, because they started wrestling so late. And we're getting so many kids like that. Like we have to I'm showing high crotches and sweep singles and doubles like everybody else is. How do we take these kids and catch them up? And then we've been able to do that through processes and systems. And we could get into this on another one, but I'm a big believer like you. At the highest levels, everybody knows the same moves, and details separate people, right? And I tell wrestlers all the time, take you from terrible to good or good to great. But there's all these other little things. You have like 7 basic skills of wrestling, but there's all these other little things. Learning to use hooks, learning leverage points. And I have this whole like unique, weird written out system of all these little outside things that aren't moves. They are positional that help you to
Concepts
from one thing to another. And it's funny because you have a jiu-jitsu background, so did I. And when I got into jiu-jitsu, I literally went to a jiu-jitsu practice, did very well, but I walked out of there going, you know what? There's a whole world of things on the ground, and I've been wrestling since I could walk. There's a whole world of things on the ground that I haven't seen or felt before. And I can't use a lot of these techniques in wrestling because I can't choke people out, or I can't, put pressure against joints and things like that. But I can take the principles behind these and I can utilize them in wrestling, and it helps open up my mind and expand. And so I know I see what you're doing with your camps, which is phenomenal. But I think this applies on a larger level too. The methodology or the methods that people use might change over time, but there are these base things behind those. And if you can really figure, maybe we call them principles or concepts, if you can really figure those out, you can be successful quick. And then you can help other people duplicate that success, which is one of the things.
I tell them it's, smash and learning curves. It's for mindset training, similar to anything. We have 3 different types of clients. The kids that are average or below average that are looking to kind of just jump levels. Like you said, like save time. You didn't say save time. What was the word you used? We speed up time. Right. Yeah. We need to speed up time. I don't want to wait 2 years to get better. I want to get better now. How do I learn to get whatever I've got and get more of it? Right. Then you've got the second tier, the good kids that are trying to close the gap on the great kids. Right. Maybe they're losing in the blood round, or they're placing 5th or 6th and they want to place top 3. And then you got the kids that are at the top of the food chain that want to widen the gap. Right. And realistically, what I found growing up in New York and then wrestling Division I and then coaching high school up there, I was already like, wow, big difference from New York to Maryland. Then huge difference from Maryland to Texas. I couldn't teach them moves. I had to teach them process because they lack the foundation and fundamentals to plug moves into. So as a club coach, I can't teach you all the fundamentals, right? But I can teach you how to crush the process to win positions. And then I didn't realize what I was doing until I spent a week with Valentin Kalika. This is when he was still working with Helen Maroulis. So she had just won in Rio, and the next January, December, whatever it was, he was my roommate for a week. And he's like, you Americans, you know all these moves. You learned like 100 moves. Like in Russia, in Europe, we win position. We learn how to win position. You win position, the moves take care of themselves. You know 100 moves. we don't know 100 moves, but we know how to win the position better that your moves don't matter. Right. And that really like spoke to me because I knew what I was doing, but not put in such a way.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're teaching heavy hands. We're teaching fakes to create angles and opportunities. But like, what are we teaching? The process to win, not moves trying to score.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's huge. And it's something that I think we're going to see it more and more. I think it's going to continue to grow and get bigger. And coaches have to adapt. They just have to. If you don't adapt, you get left behind. And again, I mean, there's a lot of basic things that aren't going to go away. But man, this sport seems like it's speeding up real quick. And all we have to do is look at Iowa style and Oklahoma State style. So John Smith and Dan Gable style, which dominated everything while we were growing up. And then all of a sudden, Kel Sanderson comes in and this major cultural and movement, this whole entire shift happens that no one could have ever seen, right? And then now everybody's jumping on board with that. Things can change very quickly. So, all right, I want to do this. I want to, as we get ready to wrap up, because dude, we could have like a 3-hour conversation easily. So, man, I for a couple more of these. But with the life experiences that you've had, and this is really hard to narrow down, but give me just like, I don't care, man, 1 to 3 lessons of like, these are things I've learned along the way that you always have to have to succeed. You always have to be good at whatever it is you're trying to do.
Man, that's a tough question. I guess I'll repeat myself a little and then I'll add some nuances that I've learned. I feel like there are things that always made me very successful. And then there's things that I've learned that now successful, like my future success will always be a part of, things that I've learned from other people. Something that made me successful and that I've learned, and I've only learned to put it eloquently in, let's say, the last 5 years, is like you have to have a very strong why. Why am I doing this? Right? Not just in sport. Like you need to know what you love about something or someone, and you need to know why you're doing it. Right? So let's not just talk about sport. Let's talk about life. Sport's a vehicle for life. Right? So I need to know why I started wrestling and why I chose to wrestle in college and why I chose to wrestle on this team, wherever stage you're at. Like, you need to know why you're pursuing this endeavor and these goals. And then you also need to know what you love about it, right? Kind of like I said, the Friedrich Nietzsche quote, a man who knows his why will be able to get through any how. So when times get tough, you're going to be able to dial back to 2 things. Why did I start this in the first place? Whether it's why did I wrestle in the first place? Why did I choose to wrestle in college? Why am I training so hard to win Fargo? Whatever it is, right? And then what do you love about wrestling? Because when stuff gets hard, that's what you're going to grab onto. Well, when you can learn to do that through sport, which is fun, then when life gets hard, when your job gets difficult, right? Or you lose your job, or you're in a marriage and your marriage starts dwindling down and you're struggling in your marriage. Why did I choose to marry this person in the first place? What do I love about them? Are those stronger than me leaving? Yes. Then let's proceed. No. Well, I need to consider if this relationship, whether it's a personal, sports, romantic, whether it serves me or it's pulling more from me. Right? So I think that's a very strong thing. Like you said, kids don't know, kids aren't so, they don't begin with the end in mind, at least something in realistic fashions. They don't know why. So they don't walk a very straight line. But name a legendary champion who didn't live that right life, who didn't have, it's going to be very hard to name those people. So knowing your why and what you love about it, I did that without knowing. Like, why did I live the right life for years and make every decision for years? I wanted to be a Division I athlete. I wanted to be recruitable, and I wanted to be in the FBI or something, a national security, national law enforcement, national intelligence community. I had to live a very specific way. People always ask, like, man, how did you lose 14 pounds in 24 hours? Because I had to. I had to make weight. Like, if I want to wrestle, I got to make weight. Now, I don't understand how you can do that. Well, my why was I want to compete. I love competing. And I messed up on my weight, so I'm going to figure it out. So knowing your why, something that I've like if we want to be successful as coaches, we have to learn how to teach process. And that's, I think, it's very difficult. That's where I think my wrestling camps come in. We have to understand what the process is. What does that look like for the kids that are on our level, right? And how do we teach them to not only crush it, but how to focus on it. But what does it look like? What does it feel like, right? Evaluate everything in their life based on process and performance, not on outcomes. Because again, like take my beginnings of wrestling mindset, I felt like I was making gains, but it's not like the company and I were necessarily bringing as much business home. We were cultivating a lot of relationships. I was okay with that process because that process was eventually going to give me that outcome. So being process focused. The other thing that I learned from spending a lot of time with the Sanderson family is, and this is like outside of like predator mindset and talking about process, gratitude is the number one thing that like I get asked to speak about. And that's something, it's a concept that's very hard for people that don't grow up in a faith-based family to realize. Why was Penn State so successful? They're having so much fun. Well, why isn't everybody else having so much fun? Well, Penn State's not focused on outcomes. They recruit faith-based athletes. The most important thing in their life is their relationship with God, which means a relationship with family is probably number 2. School is number 3. Wrestling is something fun that they do with their friends. They don't have the relationship with wrestling that most wrestlers do. Wrestling is something that they use to glorify God, to showcase the gifts that they gave him. Literally speak to those Penn State athletes and those coaches. That's what you're going to get from them. Why are you guys able to have so much fun? Oh man, I just love wrestling. I'm just so glad that like I get the opportunity to like compete with my friends and my teammates and go to practice and get better. They're so thankful for the opportunities to practice because they're opportunities to get better. Those opportunities to get better, get them more prepared to showcase the gifts that God gave them. Not, well, I compete because I have to win and I don't want to lose. That's why you saw such a drastic cultural shift. It's not about being serious and win. Like if you're not winning, then like that's not what we do. Like I'm not going to quote the program, but literally the coach then said, like, if you ain't winning, you're losing. And this program, we're winners, and that's what we know how to do. That's a massive amount. Their self-identity is connected to that. When you're focused on opportunities, you make the most of opportunities. You don't have to be religious to be successful, although faith is for certainly a mental edge. You don't have to be religious to be successful, but you have to give it up to a higher power that's bigger than you. So if it's family, if it's team, if it's love, right? Being great, like learning how to weaponize gratitude. That's what Penn State did. Because no one paid attention to 4 brothers being number 1 in the country. Everyone paid attention to Kale being 159-0. When I talked to them, I asked them, why are you good? Like each one, I met everyone but Cody. Why are you good, Dad? Why are you good, Dad? Why are you good, Dad? Dad, why are they so good? It was never about wrestling. Their dad didn't teach them the best technique. Their dad taught them to focus on wrestling in a very, very different way. That's a conversation for a whole nother podcast. But like, it's 90% about the culture they grew up in, which was very different, very unique, very hard to replicate because their dad created that culture from when they were 5 to when they were 18 and then left and created and embodied that. So, but knowing your why and what you love about anything that you choose to do. Learning, like you can tell a kid trust the process all the time. Well, all they think that means is listen to coach and work hard. Coach, I did everything that you told me. Why didn't I win a state title? Everything you told me. Why didn't I win a state title? It comes down as they were focused on the wrong things, right? And that's where mindset training comes in. But being able to teach and weaponize process, and then being able to teach and weaponize gratitude. If you have a team or an athlete with those 3 things, skill is easy to teach. Like unless a kid's just not built for this sport, skill is easy to teach. You give those 3 things, you have the intangibles for a very successful person at anything that they do. Yeah, and that's why wrestling mindset is so unique.
Yeah, dude, that is huge. I mean, so anybody listening, man, first off, never leave your best ideas, never leave the best things that you hear up to your mind because you will forget them. So take notes, put notes in your phone, have a journal, whatever it is, take notes. I'll go back, I'll take notes off of this right here. And I can tell you right now that for me and as a Christian, but when I gave my life to Christ as a freshman in college, it changed me as a wrestler, and I became a much better wrestler. And like you were saying a while ago, because I no longer wrestled for me to be the best. I saw it as a platform to glorify God. And it changed everything about the way I wrestled. I became a much better wrestler because of it. My wrestling team that's one of the things. We have a huge sign hanging in our wrestling we talk about, but we get to do this. But gratitude, effort, and toughness is what it stands for. So I think I want to bring you back specifically for just like a gratitude podcast at some point, man, so we can go over this because it is so powerful.
I've been writing a lot. I have all these ideas, and a friend of mine who lived with me for a short time. Oh, you probably remember Christos. You've seen Coach Tos. He's like, man, you say these things, like you need to write them down. So I started writing down stuff. And I believe ultimately, like, what do we try to teach people in wrestling? Grit. What is grit? Grit is gratitude, being relentless, having integrity, and being tough. Those are the four pillars of grit. If you want to put an extra T, total commitment. Those are the 5 things that it takes to be successful, right? And like we can get into the whole like knowing your why, the love, but like weaponizing gratitude, teaching people how to be relentless. Hey, you go out there, be aggressive. He has an idea of what that is, but he doesn't know how to physically execute. Ask the wrestler to write a paragraph on the spot about being aggressive. What does being aggressive on your feet look like? What, you think he's just going to magically go out there and know what being aggressive is? He knows what his moves are, but if his moves aren't there, he's so worried about, well, I don't want to get scored on. I can't get to my offense, right? But when you teach a person what it means to be, how to be relentless, what are examples of people that are relentless, that are aggressive role models, right? People with integrity, they tend to live a championship life. People without integrity, they don't live a championship life. So anyways, yeah, I love the gratitude thing. I 100% credit everything that I know and building this like passion and foundation for it from Kyler Sanderson and Brad Pataki when I spent time at Brad's house because I worked with his team. I learned so much from them that it changed the way that I look at everything in my life. And then like 2.0 gratitude was like seeing everything as opportunity. Adversity is an opportunity to grow. I tore my ACL. Well, I'm going to get tougher in ways that I never could because this is going to be a really tough rehab, right? But, seeing opportunity versus obligation, like you said, I get to versus I have to. Anyways, like with Kyler, I'm going to share one last quick story with Kyler to show you this is one of the reasons Penn State's. I'm going to share you a quick story about Kyler and Kale. And this is one of the reasons why Penn State and those guys were so successful. I'm at Ironman. Kyler Sanderson walks up to me. He had just started his club, Sanderson Wrestling Academy. This is like, 2017, 2018. Kyler comes up to me. And he said, hey, man, I'm Kyler Sanderson. I'm like, yeah, I know who you are. And he's like, man, I knew you were going to be here, and I wrote down a couple questions. Do you mind if I ask you? I'm like the youngest of 4 Sanderson brothers that saw it all, you want to ask me questions? He's like, my dad always told us that you can learn something from everyone. And I may be an expert in certain areas, but I'm certainly not an expert in your area. I know about it. I know some good things, but it's all you study all day. And you're passionate about it. So you mind if I ask you some questions? The dude sat down and had a notebook with pre-written questions ready for me at a wrestling tournament. And I said, can I ask you questions when I'm done? And he's like, yeah, sure. So like, that's how our really good friendship bloomed. But like the youngest of all 4 Sanderson brothers, who now runs one of the most successful academies in the country, who's a 2-time Division I All-American, sitting there picking my brain. I was like blown away.
Yeah.
And then now Kyler and I are like, he just called me the other night. We talked for an hour. He wanted my opinion on something, not because he couldn't answer the question, but because he values someone else's opinion. He knows that in order to really understand what he's trying to figure out, he needs to hear it from somebody else that thinks about it all the time. Because Kyler, I would hire him to do anything like related to mindset or whatever in a heartbeat and be perfectly fine giving him zero mentorship and trusting anything that he has to say. But why is he and guys like Kale the best? Because they constantly want to learn. So the first year that I did camp for Kyler's family, Kale's there. No joke, the only time in 5 years I've legit been nervous. Like, I know how to weaponize nerves. I know how to whatever. I just got done with Fargo. I had no voice. I had no water. So my mouth, like all of our mouths get dry before we do something important. We're not nervous. It's just fight or flight. Like we get that, right? Legit, the only time in my mindset career I was nervous because Kale was sitting right in front of me and parked for a good spot to listen to what I was saying. And anyways, I sit there and I give my spiel. I open up camp. It's Kyler's first time doing his camp. And he invited me to open up camp and do mindset training every day. It's me, Kale, and Zane Rutherford to 300 kids, right? Like the picture that I always share is from that camp. And Kale's sitting there, and I'm trying my best to convince myself, you're not nervous, you're just excited for this opportunity. Like I'm sweating. Anyways, I do my spiel. I think I do a good job considering I barely had a voice. And Kale comes up to me afterwards. I didn't come up to Kale. Kale comes up to me. Hey, man, I'm Kale. I'm like, nice to meet you. Like, I know who you are. And he's like, I just wanted to say, I've heard so many speeches on sports psych. I've never heard some of the things that you've said and put this way. And one of the things he was specifically referencing the stick trick. And he was like, I love that. That's such a great idea. And then he cracked a bunch of super dry, sarcastic jokes. And I was like it's like him trying to like shoot the shit. You know what I mean? Like anybody that like Kale doesn't talk a lot. Kale's really dry sense of humor, really sarcastic. I'm like, is he serious? Or is like Kale Sanderson talking smack right now? I can't tell. So I just like try to laugh and be like, oh, that's so fun. Thanks, coach. I appreciate it. I don't know if you're telling me, I don't know if you're like talking crap or not, but like, I appreciate it, you know? But like those guys don't stop learning. They're always humble. They constantly want to figure out ways. So the best quote, and we'll end on this. Well, I'll end my mouth on this is if you are not improvising and adapting, constantly improvising and evolving, you will learn a painful lesson from someone who has. That is what every Division I program in the top 10 learned for 8 out of 9 years.
Yeah.
I don't understand. How are they killing us? How is he pinning the number 1 dude in the country? Because he's focused on pinning you. He wants to be the most exciting wrestler that's ever been alive. Bo Nickel, Jason Knopf. They're not out there to win matches. They want to be performers. They want to put on a reality TV show that people want to watch. They're not doing reckless stuff, but they're looking at putting up points. They don't care if you take them down. They just want to score. They're mad if they don't pin or tech you. So I talked to, I'll say one more thing. I talked to Casey Cunningham at David Taylor's place, and I was like, man, everyone's been trying to beat you for years, wrestling versus wrestling. It's not about your wrestling. They need to shift their focus on the things that you do. Your guys are focused on different things. And when you guys lose, like when the opportunity presents itself for you guys to lose, that's going to be why. Because they finally got out of this worked for 20 years and this is what we're going to do. They had to evolve. You saw a different Iowa team. I feel like you saw a different Oklahoma State team this last year. They finished 13th 2 years ago.
Yeah. Worst
finish in program history. So anyways, like I get passionate about it. I'm sweating because I love it. Right.
No, it's good.
Thank you so much.
It's good. Hey, so I always end with this, Coach, and you can go as long as or as short as you want. And sure. This has been phenomenal, by the way. So I'm gonna put you on the hot seat. All right. So here's how this works. You're gonna tell me about either a hero, a highlight, or a heartbreak in your life. Okay. So someone's your hero, a highlight in your life, or heartbreak, and just explain it, man. Why is it what it is, and why is it important to you? You pick.
Hero, heartbreak, or highlight. Hero, heartbreak, or highlight. Hero, heartbreak, or highlight. I feel like I've definitely referenced like these sort of things before, and I'm like, can't recall. I saw your question earlier and I was thinking about it and I couldn't think of it. I'm going to have to say something that definitely like changed my perspective on a lot of things is that, I was, in my opinion, a shoo-in for a certain job at the Bureau. And I thought for sure, like, I was going to get the job, right? But I had to get the interview first. I didn't even get the interview. I was like blown away. I was like, wow, this resume has gotten me higher level interviews. How could I not? I was crushed. And ultimately, that's when I realized, like, there are certain things that I can't control. And if I can't control them, I have to control what's around me. The loss of that interview is what shifted my focus to, I can't leave the FBI. I need to constantly grow my career, to how do I pursue a career in wrestling, likely with wrestling mindset. Similarly to, as a wrestling coach, man, I'm doing good. And 5 of my kids in the state finals just didn't win. Or 4 of my kids just didn't win, right? Heartbreak. Like, I had to have good things fall apart for better things to come together. And I feel like that is something that people don't realize. So I saw opportunity in adversity. It's how do I make this for me? How do I make this for me? Because otherwise I'm going to sit here and be sad about it. How do I make this for me? Why is this the best thing that could have happened to me? Otherwise I'm just going to dwell on it. And that's what drove me to, like, be what I am now. Was like, I was so hungry to pursue something. And when I was given the green light that I'm in control, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, what a better quote, or what a better thought process to end on right now, as people are experiencing adversity, and how to find the best in it, how to let it light a fire in your belly,
How does it serve you? If you didn't come out of COVID better than you came in, you did it wrong. Right. Yeah. And that looks different for everybody, but you have to see opportunity in adversity. Anytime something bad happens, you need to ask yourself, okay, what did I learn from this? What does this teach me? And how do I make the most of it? When something good happens, oh, I'm thankful that what I'm doing is paying off. Now, how do I get more out of it? So it's like, I pin somebody in 2.5 minutes. How do I pin them in under 2 minutes? Right? I text somebody, but it took me 5 minutes and 30. How do I do this? I major them. How do I text them? The problem that we're seeing, and that college coaches are saying, is that wrestling always taught us all these life lessons. It doesn't anymore, because we have a different generation and we're approaching them with the same, we're trying to solve 21st century problems with 20th century solutions.
Yeah.
And we have evolved. And we, just like Penn State evolved and nobody else did, and they were beating everybody, we have to evolve as coaches if we want to solve these problems. We want wrestlers to gain from wrestling what we did. We have to change what we value, what we focus on, and what we coach. Ultimately, if you want to change how kids feel, then coaches have to change the way that we think.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. All right, well, before we jump off here, Coach, and again, this has been Coach Mike Moor, Mindset Mike. How can people contact you, man? What's your social media and those type of things?
Sure. Mindset Mike. At mindset_Mike, Instagram and Twitter. Twitter, I feel like I either go viral or I get 2 likes. On Instagram, I just posted a video and it got 17,000 views and like 2,500 likes in 24 hours. Posted the same video on Twitter and it got 2 likes. So I would say Instagram and Facebook. So mindset_Mike, and then on Facebook, Mike Moor. You can find me or look for Mindset Mike. You can, anybody, whether it's questions about the program or it's just questions about like life in general, mindset related, wrestling, other sports, or what a lot of people ask me is, they say, hey, I saw you work for the FBI. How do I get in there? And a big part of that is mentorship, not a chance. I got through the interview process if I didn't have 2 very key mentors, maybe 3 very key mentors. It is a process that you can be more qualified, but if I know the process better than you, I'm going to beat you. What does that sound like? Wrestling. You can be better at wrestling, but I'm better here. So I'm going to break you because I may not be able to beat you at wrestling, but I can break you down to where you're on my level. And that's what I did. So anybody about, wrestling, FBI, mindset training, whatever. I just like to meet people. I feel like if I could get paid to network, then I would do that for a living. I genuinely love that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on here, man. I am grateful. I appreciate it. And hey, this has been another episode of Coach P's Perspective. May God bless you and let his face shine upon you and give you peace. Until next time, see y'all.